Hello and welcome to the last part of the March Birthstone Bookmark lace along. I have now completed my lace and I'm ready to join my bobbins back into my start, so they're all ready to go. Before we start doing that, I just want to show you a handy tip that helps if you're unsure as to where to put your bobbins, as how many pairs go where and that sort of thing. So this is my prick-in, and as you can see, and as you remember, we started with 2 pairs on this first pin and 1 on each of the others. So that generally means, and I say generally because sometimes a design may alter this, but generally if you started with 1 pair on a pinhole, you will end up with 1 pair on a pinhole. So all of these will come across here, and then this point here will have 2 pairs going into it. So that's one easy way of looking at your lace and knowing where your pairs, how many pairs need to go into each pinhole and where they need to go, because everything follows, with torsion, everything follows a diagonal line. So how do I do that on my lace? Well, when you've got your lace and you've got a lot of pins, now I've pushed my pins down. I wouldn't advise that because there's still the chance that your threads may jump off, but I'm doing it because then you can see what I'm doing and what I'm talking about. So I've pushed my pins down, but yours won't be, so it'll make it a lot harder for you to see where your pairs are going to. So if you're ever unsure as to where your pairs are going to, find a point that is obvious. So say you've got something that is a honeycomb and you've got honeycomb going to a honeycomb. I've got a pair coming from this pin here to a directly opposite, because it's a ground stitch, so it's going directly to this pin. Now this is quite a small piece, and I fully understand that when you get a bigger piece it's a little bit more complicated, but I would find points that you can then say yes, that definitely goes into there, and then when you're on a bigger piece you can work either way, either direction. There's no rule that says you have to start at the end and work to the other end. So if you have a point in the middle, say you're doing a wedding garter and you have a point at the middle that you can go, yep, 2 pairs go into there, sew those in and then work outwards. So I could actually start sewing this pair into this pin and then decide to go that direction or that direction. It's not there's no reason why you can't start halfway through a row and work backwards, as long as you can see exactly where you're going. So that's one tip that I would suggest. Make sure you start with a point that you can actually confirm that yes, my pairs go into there. Now this one, I'm actually going to be starting this end and leaving my 2 pairs at the other end till the end, so I can definitely see that this pair here is coming straight across. So I'm just going to shunt my other pairs out the way, hopefully. There we go. Because this is going to be a little bit tricky because you've got pins, you've got thread, and then you're trying to sew into a very small area. The first thing I'm going to do is put my second twist on my bobbin so that I know I've done it. I'm then going to pick up my pin like so. So your sewing is going to be exactly the same as you've done on your large loops. This is just going to be on a smaller scale. I've checked my Lazy Susan and I'm hoping I can see the hole because I'm having to keep my head out of the way because of the filming. So I think I'm going to go down this pinhole and to the left. So let me see if it will work. Yep, so down the pinhole and to the left. Now I've gone under all my other threads over there, but I'm still going to pull back because you can still manage to get your thread. So here it comes slowly. There we go. So this is a little bit slower than your large loops. but it's the one thing that you're going to need to take a little bit of time on. So I'm just going to lengthen this bobbin and hope that I've got enough on here. What I might actually do, let me just move my bobbins, because that's a short bobbin. I'm going to move my bobbins over the top of my loop so that I can make my loop with the other one, which is a bit longer. That was a bit of thread chicken there, and I won. So I've just literally moved my bobbins to the other side, and I'm taking this one, which is my longer thread, because it makes it easier. I haven't got to worry about my little end. Now this is the point where I would strongly recommend holding on to that thread, because you're having to deal with so many pins here. So now I'm going to lay my bobbin to the back when I do my sewings like this. On this other one, I didn't have to worry about it too much, but with this one, it's slightly different because you've got so many pins involved around. So I've got my new loop, nice big loop, and I've laid my bobbin to the back. And this will become more apparent when you start moving along the line, because obviously on the other one we were just doing one sewing, but here we're having to do multiple sewings. So I've laid my bobbin to the back, I've taken off my twists, and I'm going to now I'm taking that thread off the bobbin, it's no point in keeping it on, it's so small. I'm going to put that thread through, hold my thread in my Lazy Susan, and carefully pull it down and out. And that's my first sewing in complete. Now the other thing that you want to do is to actually put the pin back in the pinhole. I am not tying this thread until I have everything else secured. Now in order to get my pinhole back, if you hold your bobbins away from you, it will open up your hole and you can easily slide your pin in. And I'm going to push it down because that's now secure. So that's my first pair done. I then move on to my second pair. So again, I'm going to just double check, line it up. So there's my pins, one pair coming off of there, and it's going to go directly opposite to the opposite pin. First thing I'm going to do is put my twist on, and then I'm going to pull out my pin, if I can find it. There it is. So as you can see, this is a little bit tricky, but try not to push those last pins down, because that's the point where you're going to then risk the threads jumping off the pin. The other thing is that if you've got nice pinholes to start with, then it makes life a lot easier. So I've made sure my threads are the same length, and I'm going to go down to the left. Now I don't have to worry about this one because there's some thread on there, so I'm just going to go down to the left, slide it forward, pull it back slightly, and I know it's gone under the threads here, but I can see that little white in that gap there. So I'm going to pull my loop up, and again I always tend to make my loop with the bobbin that is closest to my Lazy Susan, so that's this left hand bobbin. So I'm popping it through, holding on to my ends, holding on to this one, pulling down, and take the tension off this bobbin, and I lay it to the back at this point. It just means it's not in your way. Make sure your threads are off, your twists are off your thread. Take your other bobbin, slide it through, put your Lazy Susan in your loop, take your other bobbin which has got tangled. I'm not saying this is easy. And pull it down, and that's your sewing made. Take your bobbins and hold them to the back, which opens up your pinhole. Pop your pin back in, push it down. That was a bent pin. Don't use bent pins. but I've put my pins down because I didn't think I needed them. And that's my second sewing done. So as you can see, they're all starting to congregate at the back of my pillow, and I'm not tying anything off until I have everything sewn in. It's a safety precaution, because if you suddenly get to the end and find that one's gone wonky and you've got 5 pairs at the end, you know something's gone wrong. And if you've tied them, cut them, and that's the other thing that I do, is I don't cut my threads short, I cut them with a length. But if you've tied those reef knots already, you won't be able to, or you can, but it won't be easy. You'll need to undo all those reef knots to get back to the point where you need to correct it. So I sew in, don't tie off. Now I'm going to go and sew in the rest of my pairs down to this point, and then I will show you how to deal with 2 pairs into 1 pinhole. I'm now ready to sew my last pair, 2 pairs in, but before that I want to just go through a couple of things that I forgot to mention that would make your life a little bit easier. So the first one is just don't forget that your lace pillow moves. So if you're finding it difficult to make one of the sewings, move your pillow around to a different angle and you'll find the sewing will probably go straight in. It's just really to do with where you are on your pillow, but don't forget the pillow does move, so you can actually move it around to make your sewing. It's not completely stuck still. The other thing I wanted to show you was, first of all, if you are having trouble finding your pinhole and getting your Lazy Susan in, or your crochet hook in, the thing to do is to pop your pin back in the pinhole, because sometimes when you mess around with these pinholes too much, the pinhole disappears. So if you can get your pin back into the pinhole and then wriggle it a little bit, it will open up your pinhole and you can then try again. So that's another handy tip. The other one is, how do you undo a sewing? Well, sometimes when you pull one of the threads, it releases one of the loops. So I don't know if you can see here, if I pull this bobbin, it releases the loop, and then you can just get in there with your Lazy Susan and pull the loop up. If it hasn't released the loop, then you can aim to pick the loop up with your Lazy Susan. Now, I would recommend using your Lazy Susan for this, because if you use a pin, you might actually split your threads, which would then cause a bit of an issue. So as you can see, I'm picking the loop up. Now, I'm not sure whether this is the loop that from the thread that made the loop, or if it's the thread that went down the loop. So if you just pull your thread up, and you can see nothing's pulling on this, so I think this is the one that made the loop. And if I then pull this one through, there we are. Can you see it's become loose? Don't pull your loop back down until you see your your bobbin release, because if you haven't removed the correct one, you could be tying yourself up in knots. So make sure that your thread has completely released before you pull the loop out and redo your sewing. So that's one of the tips. I found that really useful, because quite often you might find you have to undo your sewings, and knowing how to undo them is really handy. So I've now reached the last pinhole, so here it is here, and I have to sew my 2 pairs into that single pinhole. So I've got my white and my red, and I'm going to make the sewing with my red pair because I've got a white Lazy Susan thread, which wasn't very clever. So I'm going to take my pin out, and then I'm going to go down the hole, if I can find it. This one at the point of a fan is always a little bit wriggly, because obviously there's nothing supporting it, whereas the other ones had the pins the other side. So I'm just So I'm going to have to put my pin in because I can't get too close because of the camera. Otherwise all you'll see is my head. So let's see, give that another go. I'm going to do the best that I can. But obviously you're going to be closer to your lace than I am, and you've probably got better eyesight. So let me see, just have to hold my breath. And usually making sewings is a lot easier than this. I should have put my Lazy Susan thread in before I started filming. The other option that you could do with this is to use magic threads, and I've made a previous video on how to use those, and they're really ingenious and really will save you a lot of time. So right, okay, that's not brilliant, but I'm in. So I've put my Lazy Susan thread through. I'm going to pull it back to create my first loop. I'm then going to pull my Lazy Susan loop up. Now at this point I'm going to be using 2 bobbins to make my loop, so I'm going to put the 1 pair through, and then I'm going to pull it down. Now sometimes this hole is too small because we're looking at 2 threads going through a tiny hole. If you find it doesn't work, I usually stroke it with my fingernail, and there we are, it's pulled up. You just need to tease it through. So I'm just going to pop my Lazy Susan in. Now what's different when you have 2 bobbins, 2 threads, is that I don't take my Lazy Susan thread out, because at the moment this thread is my safety net, so that if I lose one of these loops, so if I drop it, when I pick it back up again, I can see instantly that my bobbins, my threads on my bobbins are the right way round. If I didn't have that thread in and I dropped my loop and picked up one and then picked up another in the different direction and then tried to put my other pair through those loops, I'd end up with a bit of a mess. So I haven't taken my Lazy Susan thread out because I'm dealing with 2 threads. So I'm then going to take my other pair, and I'm going to do it one at a time because trying to get spangles through threads with pins and all sorts of things is a bit of a nightmare. So now I've got both my threads through. They're both going in the same direction through the loop. That's all you need to make sure, that they're both going through the loop in the same direction, because you don't want one going one way and one the other. I'm now going to pull my threads down, and that is my sewing, my 2 pairs sewn into 1 pinhole. So I'm just going to do exactly as I have done before, just pull it back slightly, find a pinhole and secure it. Now when I work with sewing 2 pairs into 1 pinhole, if I was to tie a reef knot now with them in their pairs, that pair that runs through the middle of the loop will be just have the knot on the other side of the loop. And now I don't know if this could happen, but I'd rather not find out, but it could be possible that the knot pulls back through the loop. So whenever I'm dealing with 2 pairs, I split them up when I tie my reef knot. So I now have a red and a white and a red and a white, and I will tie these in their pairs, red white, not in the white and the red pair. And I feel this means then that your knot is within the other side of the loop, if that makes sense, because you've split the pairs up, so you've basically attached the loop to the thread that went through it. I hope that makes sense. I've not known it happen, but I'd rather it didn't happen at all than me not warn about it. So I now need to tie my reef knot. Now this particular pair, both of them, are going to go off and do a bit of a plait with a bead on the end to make a little tail end for the bookmark. So I'm not going to cut these just yet. So I'm going to instead tie my reef knot. Now I am tying a reef knot before I do my plait, just in case something happens to the plait. At least then your threads are still secure up at this corner. The way I tie my reef knot is I turn my bobbins on their heads, so to speak, so that the spangles are pointing upwards. I'm then going to hold the threads so that they go around my little fingers, and that then creates a loop. So I'm then going to do right over left, left over right. Now that's a reef knot, and the reason you do your reef knot is because you can undo it, as opposed to a granny knot which isn't easily undone. So I'm going to take my right bobbin and lay it over my left. Then I'm going to pull this thread round and pull it through. Then I'm going to tighten it up, but I'm not pulling on my bobbins, I'm pulling on my thread. So I'm really close to my knot as I push, push, and I don't know what you're doing really. You're pushing your knot into the corner. So now my bobbins have switched places, and I now need to do it again. So I make sure that my threads are around my little fingers like that. They're just resting there, but it means then I have control over my circle. And then I'm going to do my left bobbin over my right. So I'm still holding this thread here. I'm going to put the red thread over my bobbin, and then I'm going to pull it through, and it then creates my circle with my knot on it. So again, I'm going to pull down with the threads, not the bobbins. Now, sometimes you might find this knot slips if you've been busy with your bobbins, and then the knot slips. So if you pull it here, then pull it there, then pull it, hoping you can see this because my hands might be in the way. So you're constantly pulling the ends, both sides of that knot that you're pulling down, and then when you're happy, pull it in tight, and that's your reef knot done. So that one I can forget about. So I'm ready to do my second one. So here's my threads here. So my red's going down there and my white's going down there. And I'm going to do my right over left. And if you keep an eye on one of the bobbins, if we keep an eye on this one here, so I'm going over and under. And there's my circle with my knot on it. So I'm going to then just slide that down and pull it tight. So this bobbin was in my right hand, it's now in my left. And then I'm going to do, so my threads are around my little fingers, left over right, through there. There's my loop with my knot. So I'm going to move it down. At the same time, I'm going to pull up on that first knot, move my second knot down, pull up again, pull it down, pull up a third time, or as many times as you need, and once you're happy, pull it down, and there's your knot tight. So that's my two pairs that will go off and do my plait. So I'm going to leave them there for a minute, and I'm just going to show you how I do it if I'm not keeping my pairs on. So this is my pair, and I'm going to cut them with a length. Now I never ever cut my thread short until my lace is off the pillow. Partly because if you ever need to replace any of your threads, if you've cut your threads long, then you actually have an end that you can put extra length on for your bobbins if you need to replace them for any reason. And also I'm just not sure how close you could actually get to your lace with all those pins in. So I always trim mine when my lace is off the pillow. So now this is going to be slightly different, but I'm still doing my right over left. So this is my right hand thread and this is my left hand thread. We're not going to be able to distinguish them because they're the same colour. So I'm going to put my right hand one over the top of my, well, when it behaves, right hand bobbin thread over my left like that. Then I'm going to go around my thread just the once, so I've gone over and around. So there's my thread over through the loop, and then I can pull that tight. Now I'm going to take my left hand thread, lay it over my right, and it's not very easy to see this, I know, because they're the same colour, but there's my left hand thread going over my right through the loop, and then you can do the same again, pull, tension, pull, tension until you're right at the bottom, and there's your reef knot made. Now it's entirely up to you whether you do it on the bobbins or off the bobbins. I would suggest trying both, because then you'll get an idea as to which way feels more comfortable for you. So that's how you make your sew-ins at the end, and how you do your reef knot. Now the last thing I'm going to show you is how to plait, because we want a plait down on the center or the end of this bookmark where we're going to pop our bead. Now it's up to you as to what colour you make your bookmark, but originally it was in a lovely green and orange to do with the birthstone of March. So I now have my two pairs that are going to make my plait, and the first thing that I'm going to do is put a twist on both of them. So, and I'm going to tension them up. Now when I tension my pairs like this, I hold them, I suppose, a bit like chopsticks. So I've got my pointed finger in the middle of the two. Now when you do a plait, it consists of half stitches. So I'm going to do a half stitch, then I'm going to do another half stitch, and then I'm going to pick up my bobbins and tension up. Then I'm going to do a half stitch and another half stitch. So two half stitches, pick up your bobbins and tension. Now it's really crucial that you do two and tension, because if you do lots and lots and lots of half stitches, you will not be able to tension all those half stitches up. Two is the limit. So half stitch, and then tension up. So you keep going until you've reached the length of plait that you want, and then you're going to do a little bit more, because we're going to lose a little bit of our plait when we tie our knot and put our bead on. So I'm just coming down here all the way until you get as far as you want, and then we can look at tying it off and putting the bead on. I've now come down my plait, and as you can see, I've made it considerable length, because I'm going to put a knot on here in a minute, and so I'm going to lose part of this in the process of doing my knot. So I want it longer than I actually want it to be finished. So I'm just lengthening all my pairs, and then I'm just going to chop the bobbins off. So I'm now left with my plait, which isn't secure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a knot. So I'm just making a loop, and I'm just going to put my ends through. I'm then going to control this where this ends up, because you can slide this up and down. So by putting my Lazy Susan in the hole, and that's now secured. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split my 4 ends. Well, I will do. So I'm going to put them back into their pairs, their coloured pairs. So, okay, so that's the whites and that's the reds. And then I'm going to put a bead onto my Lazy Susan, pull a loop, and then I'm going to put one of the ends through. And now, instead of pulling a loop, I'm actually going to pull the threads all the way through. And then I'm going to secure that, and I'm hoping a knot will be big enough. If not, I'll have to do a couple. I'm going to secure my bead onto my end with a knot, and I'm not going to worry. Oh, I'm going to need to do a few knots here. I'm not going to worry if my bead runs up and down, because I like that. One of the ones that I did, the August bookmark, had a couple of beads just at various points. So, right, I'm just going to put a third one on there. So you can see I'm using my Lazy Susan to control where I want that loop to end up. There we go. And that's now secure. And then I'm going to do the same with my other bead. I've got, pop it on my Lazy Susan, pull a loop, and I didn't check to see if my ends were the same length, but I'm not overly worried because this isn't a very big piece. I'm going to put my threads through and then pull the ends straight through. And this one I probably think is going to need a few knots, because this thread is finer than my white thread. Yeah, I could actually knot the 2 ends together again. So oh, that wasn't very well done. So that they join up. So I'm just using my Lazy Susan to guide the knots down into place. So while I go off and do that and secure my beads, just to let you know, I'm not a beader, so I have no idea about sizes or anything like that. And all I know is that AB is a lovely coating. I think these are AB. You can see the glint off of these. So I tend to buy all my beads with an AB coating. But while I go off and do these knots, when I come back I will show you what the original looked like and this one here. So that's better. So there's my 2 beads on, and then I can, once it's off, I can trim these up to the length that I want, and that's it, finished. I have now finished my bookmark and I have trimmed off the ends, and so here it is alongside the original one, and as I think you can see, it looks completely different with the variety of spiders in it, and maybe a little bit more interesting, but I do like the way this coloured bead is shown up in the bookmark. So sorry the end has been as long as the beginning, but I think the finish is more just as important as your starting, because without either of them you won't have a bookmark. What you can do is, if you want to, you can attach it to ribbon and use it attached to ribbon. If you're going to do that, I would suggest that you would have 2 pieces of ribbon and attach it to one, and then attach the second piece of ribbon as a backing to the first piece, so that you hide all your threads inside that have been used to stitch the bookmark onto the ribbon. Some people put them in plastic folders and other people laminate them, but it's entirely up to you. The only reason this one is on card is because it's from my samples on my board, so it's backed with Velcro so it sticks and can be seen at shows. I hope you've enjoyed this lace along, and let me know if you have. Thanks for watching.